Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back to Tabletop Totality. I'm Frank.
I'm Cody.
I'm Steve.
And this is Neil.
And today we are going to be discussing a very important topic, one that you should revisit often. The responsibilities versus expectations of the Dungeon Master and the players. So, where would you guys like to start?
I would like to start with, it's not just strictly focused on Dungeon Masters, overlords, all seers, just all of their responsibilities and expectations. And I think let's start with that one first. Uh, there's definitely been a big push of from certain people recording their sessions, playing Dungeons and Dragons and any other tabletop RPG, and they make it look amazing and awesome with all of their extra add-ins from smoke machines and everything like that. But I think that's an expectation that kind of pulls it out of the realistic realm. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, that's a little wild. I didn't know people were using smoke machines. So yeah, I'd say so, because I mean, when you get together with your friends for the first time, to play any of these games, you're not, pulling out all the stops. It's hard enough just to set up cameras, let alone, fog machines and animatronics and stuff like that, things dangling from the ceiling. So I think that's like very unrealistic for people, especially when you're hanging out with your friends from high school or you've met at college or even just your job or randomly, to expect anything of that nature, because that's a little crazy. So I think, yeah, that's a good place to start. For expectations, that is not what you're going to see at a normal table.
Yeah, I would say, I think you guys are kind of pointing to the, like the Mercer effect, which I'm not saying anything bad about Matt Mercer. I like what he does and I enjoy Critical Role, but I feel like even some of my experiences now, I've been playing for a long time now, but even some of my most recent experiences, I've had people that are kind of, you know, I think they're a little bit overly critical of, they expect you to perform like talented actors and voice over actors, and it can be a little unrealistic, and also it's being a dungeon master or a keeper or a storyteller or whatever.
Oh,
It is fun, and it does feel like that certain niche. Like, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy being the one that gets to make the story and make the world. Like, that's the most fun to me. Um I do like playing, but also being that keeper, overlord, whatever you want to call it, like that is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, especially if you are building something that is complex and taking into account your players' backgrounds and storylines and what's going on in the world. Whether it's a holiday or there's a war, whatever is happening, being aware of that. Yeah, so it's a lot of work, and I just feel like people, when you sit there and you kind of like poo poo on somebody because they don't have like thousands of dollars worth of miniatures or fog lights or whatever, like that's just kind of it's goes against what I feel is like the spirit of the game, at least for me and
Yeah.
in my experience.
Yeah.
We always played. We always thought that this was a game of much greater value, because basically, if you could get the player's handbook and a set of dice, like you could play for infinity. You could always play, and I don't know. I feel like that when you kind of like monetize it, you know.
I think it takes away sometimes from like we always play, and we do focus more on the storytelling aspect of it, if you will. You know, we're in that point where we're role playing, we're building the story. The overlord is very much more of a storyteller, and if that story is bad, then that's where we lose interest. It's not because we have to use bottle caps as tokens to represent things. So I think you get that, especially with, as you were saying, that whole Mercer effect. You kind of, people first time viewing it, they're like, "Oh my god, this is so cool," which Dungeons and Dragons is really cool, let alone. But they take it as, "Oh, I'm seeing this voice actor doing it. Now I have to do voices to have fun," and that's not the truth. You really just use your own voice. I mean, I think I rarely, because I always get caught up if I hear another voice, I try and mimic that voice. It's a bad time.
I have that problem too. I have
Even
that exact problem.
even myself, like I feel like I've played for a long time, and I like to think that I've pretty decent at doing like voice impressions and things like that. Like that's just something that I've always kind of done just as a person. It's part of my personality. But I feel comfortable putting on an accent or making a voice or making a face at the table when I'm trying to describe something. Like even if my friends laugh because that's a point of the game. Like you're trying to have fun with your friends. But somebody who's just starting, like to get into like being the dungeon master or being the keeper and like making your own game and then having somebody basically shit on it because you don't have like $100,000 set or whatever, like that's just crazy to me, and like even the guys, even the people involved in Critical Role, like they don't want to perpetuate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
They're
they
feminine.
come from humble beginnings. It's not like they're trying to say like you have to be so wealthy to win. I mean, like that's that to me is the entire reason why I got out of playing Magic the Gathering.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a
Hundred
whole nother.
percent.
That's a
Shots
whole
But no,
fired.
nother.
I listen. I loved Magic the Gathering. I thought it was great, but at the end of the day, I found myself consistently losing to people that were not more talented players or were not more involved or skilled. They just had more money.
Yep.
They could go and buy the full set of the $80 a piece card that I refused to buy because I wasn't going to spend $80 on a piece of cardboard. But
Mhm.
that's besides the point. I just think that these role playing games are it's meant to be fun, and I just worry that you get somebody like a young person who wants to try this game and builds their world and is just so in love with what they've come up with, and then they just get shit upon because they're not Matt Mercer or like that. I just feel like that's crap. you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, since we've covered that one pretty well, I think let's get into what are the DM's actual responsibilities. Let's lay it out so this way we have a clear line of what you need to do as a DM, and then on the opposite side of that is what the player's responsibilities are, and then some expectations that maybe the DM has of the player that are a little unrealistic, and kind of balance this all out.
Mhm.
So when you sit down as a DM, what is the first, responsibility that you would give them?
Well, for me, I think that you are responsible for moving the story along. You are responsible for creating the scenario and for progressing the events of the evening. So you are you might not be the star of the show of the play, but you are all of the set pieces and you are all of the lights and you are everything other than the player characters. So you kind of you wield the power of the world. Um and I for me, like I said, the story is the biggest thing for me. So that is I consider my chief responsibility when I'm behind the screen is that I have to progress the story.
So
Yeah.
in order to do that, to have a story, you need to put it somewhere. So you have to figure out where you're going to do it, whether it be something that's pre-generated that you got from, either Wizards of the Coast or you get from Chaosium or anywhere else, or a book, or even
Tabletop
real world.
totality.
Tabletop. So that first you got to find a place to do it, and then you have to do your world building to help create your story, and then from there, what happens next? Steve, what do you do next?
I'm maybe the least
He called on
equipped. Yeah, clearly. I'm probably the least equipped to do this because I haven't had a lot of experience as a DM. I feel like the responsibility of the DM, from my perspective, is sort of to develop the world and create the world that the players are supposed to play in, and like Cody said, like be all the set pieces in that world. One very important thing that you brought up is that you're everything except the player characters, and I feel like that's a very important point to make, is that the player characters should have agency over themselves, because the DM shouldn't have much agency over them in terms of their actions or their personalities or anything like that, because as the DM or the overlord or whatever, you have agency over literally everything else in the game. So so you shouldn't need to have control over your players as well. You should only be having control over, because you have control over everything else. So why would you want to?
Well, and I feel like that's something that I know that I've experienced, and I know that other people have experienced, is when you get to the point where people are just trying to progress the, like, when I say like my chief responsibility is to progress the story, that does not mean that I'm putting the story above, like, my vision of the story above everybody else. That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm trying to cultivate the story with all of the pieces that I have on the table and all of the pieces that my players are giving me.
Right.
And I'm trying to set the stage for them to do what they have to do to progress their own story. I'm not trying to write their story for them. And that's my point, is what I'm getting at, is that I've had that where people have overstepped their bounds, and it's like, your character's doing this.
Right.
You're going to go here. No. Why? Why is that?
Yeah.
That's not what I want to play.
It is not to
Exactly.
the dungeon master, overlord, etc., to tell the player, oh, you have to stool now, like you have to go to the bathroom or something like that.
Yeah.
That's Do you see that in movies? No. Honestly, I think
Right.
that's actually a good barometer of how your story should sort of play out. It should be kind of a mixture between like a television show and a movie to a degree, where you never see him go to the bathroom. And if you do, there's usually you're getting shot with a crossbow or something like that. So if your DM ever says, "Hey, you have to go to the bathroom," like, you're gonna die.
Yeah, there's a crossbow coming for you.
Killing off a player like that. So,
Obviously that's it's situational too. Like,
Yeah.
you could say something like, oh, the player ate some bad food and you knew it was bad food and they just didn't care enough to check, or they failed their check. Then you could say, yeah, you're having uncontrollable digestive issues, or something
Right.
like
Right.
that.
Right.
But just to sit there just out of the blue and be like, this is what your character's doing, like, that's just not your role as the dungeon master.
Yeah, I
your
feel
role should
like-
be, what is your character doing at this time, not
Yeah.
just what your character is doing.
Exactly. In your vocabulary as a overlord, DM, whatever you want to call yourself, it should be asking, what are you doing, not saying statements, this is what you're doing. That's a good way to always look at it, I find, because if you're constantly telling the player characters this is what you're doing, then you're just playing the game by yourself, and these are puppets in front of you.
Well, and that ties into the whole, like I said, like, where you're just trying to progress your story as the storyteller. You're just trying to progress the novel you have in your head, and you're not taking into account the efforts and the additions that are being made by the people at the table with you. You shouldn't be a dungeon master. You should just go write your book and publish that shit and start making money. Like, come on.
So then that would be, so the first part is story, and then I think what we're kind of alluding at is compromise. Like, how do you compromise your story for the people that are playing it, and what things are you going to change and shift so this way they have agency and they have the ability to uh, affect your
It's
world in a positive way.
it's a compromise, yes, but it's also like the way I try to do it is so if I look at my world, I sit there and I try to like come up with like a buckshot spread of like ideas on the map so that I can say, well, if my players are going to start over in this region, I need to have at least like a couple surrounding areas figured out of what's going on there. What's the story? Like, is there something to do? How does it tie into my overall story? That sort of thing. And then as they go and they make their choices and they decide, well, hey, we're going to go north instead of south or whatever, you know, then you say, okay, well, you find a nice spot to leave it. Then next week you can develop something else. And I'm a huge advocate of not filling in everything. Don't have everything figured out. You don't have to have everything figured out. And it's better that you don't. Because as they start to get invested in your world, as your players start to get out there and investigate things and take interest in what's going on or what the story is behind something, they're going to start contributing to your world. And you're going to have those blank spots that are not holes in your story, they're opportunities. You're sitting there waiting for your players to do something that turns that blank spot into something else. I think it's everybody's
Yes.
responsibility to just try to have fun at this
Yeah.
because this is something that I always said. I always said is that the minute it's no longer fun would be the last time I play. Because why take all that time and effort if you're no longer having fun?
Right.
And that's like I said before about Magic. Like I just hit a point where I was like, it's no longer fun to me because I see that you can just pay to win. And once I realized that that's all you had to do to win, I was like, it's like the curtain dropped. Like I wasn't invested in the game or the story anymore. I could care less. It cheapened it for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like when you're sitting at the table with everybody, whether you're a player or you want to watch or you're just trying to be interested or you're running a pre-made or you made your own world, whatever it is, you guys have to work together. It's a cooperative game. Tabletop gaming is about getting together with your friends or your family or your coworkers or whatever and trying to have fun together. And so if anybody is trying to make it so that other people are not having fun or you have a player that's just being unruly or not paying attention or playing music on their phone or laughing at music videos or whatever, you know, that's not your fault as the storyteller, as the whoever is running the game. Like that's not your responsibility. And I feel like that almost ties into like the idea that as the keeper, like you have to be like like the Judge Dredd of the game. Like, I am the law. But
Mhm.
I've been wrong before. Every dungeon master I've ever played, every person I've ever played with has been wrong about something before. And I feel like that's not something that you should drop on the DM as well, because like if they're remembering all their story and all the moving pieces of their story and all the things about your background and your characters and your stories, and then they have a good understanding of the rules, like you shouldn't just like come at them because they messed up on a stupid spell check or something. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, so like to go off of that, Cody, because you're starting to talk about like ruling and is it the DM's responsibility to know all the rules? It's still a cooperative game, so everybody should have an idea of the rules are. If you're a player, you should understand how your stuff works, but we'll get into that when they get there. As the DM, your main responsibility when it comes to rules is just making the call. You're strictly there to say, all right, this is how I'm playing it. At this point, I'll revise it when we're not in
Yeah,
session.
it's like being
Go
a
from there.
it's like being a referee in a sports game.
Yep.
It might not be right. It might not be the right call. You'll see it on ESPN later. They'll show you that it was the wrong call. But right there in the moment, you're saying, "This is what I'm doing."
This is how I'm running it
And
right now.
and often the players may try and make a case, and at that point, hear them out. You don't have to follow that, but you should at least, take it into consideration. Especially if you need to look something up and it's just like, we're going to grind the game to a halt. This is the call I'm making. We'll hold
Yeah.
on to this for now. I hear you. We're going to use this for now. Sorry.
Yeah, that's
Keep
something
moving.
that we had to kind of grow into as well, because I remember when we first started playing, like if we had a disagreement about rules or something, like everybody got the books out and we
Yeah.
sat
Yeah.
there like angrily going through the books
Yeah.
and
No,
debating
this
with
is
each
how it's
other.
done.
There's nothing
Yeah.
worse than at 2 in the morning being screamed at by a whole bunch of teenagers and having to throw the book at you, and it's just like, I didn't know that you could do that. Like, that's such an
Right.
arbitrary rule in a book that just came out 3 weeks ago that I don't even
Yeah.
own.
Yeah. So I feel like you have to, like, you guess you have to have an understanding of the rules and stuff, and you should have like the working knowledge of the mechanics of the game, but like you also can't let that paralyze your game, or people having fun. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's kind of what Frank was saying. It's also what Neil's saying, is you're the guy that has to sit there, guy or girl, that has to sit there and make the call,
Yeah.
and just say right or wrong, this is what's happening right now. And I feel like that also is a good segue for us to talk about, like, you know, the rules are guidelines, right? That's rule zero.
Yep.
Rules are guidelines. And it's a cooperative game. That's rule zero. But when you get into the thing where you, as the keeper or the lore maker, whatever you want to call it, overlord, um, when you get into when you're making your own rulings about something and you're changing the actual mechanics of the game, I feel like that's something that has to take place either like session zero or a discussion as a group, because it's a cooperative game. I don't think that you, as just the storyteller, should be in the position of like, yep, I'm just erasing this ruling, or I'm adding rules to benefit, whatever.
Oh, especially
Like,
mid game. Like mid game, I feel like that needs to be a conversation. Then, if it's
absolutely, you
yeah,
know? Or if you had something where you had a disagreement about it and you come back to the table next week and you say, "Hey guys, like, I know I said that yeah, you got that critical on that goblin, but actually I looked at the rules and it turns out that that's not how it happened. But hey, we'll leave it as it is for now. Moving on, we'll do this."
this is how
You
we
know?
do it. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is the
This
exact
is
way to
how we
handle it.
do it.
That's
Mhm.
the exact way
Yeah.
to handle it, because as you move forward, mistakes can be made. Doesn't mean the game's ruined.
Just recently, I've been playing these games forever, and just recently, I had two towns that had basically identical names, and it was like really confusing everyone. So I had to like go back and like change my world map and like change the name of the place because it was a problem. But I said, hey, I made a mistake, whatever. And you just
Mm.
move on with it. And like I know people will care about the immersion and all that, but people make mistakes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like if you're just going to be hypercritical of of the other players and of the DM or the keeper, like I don't know. I feel like that's just a surefire way to not have fun.
And not play again, because they'll probably get rid of
Well, it's almost like
you.
when you go and you watch a movie or you play a game and like critics are like have been like very unkind to it. Like
Mm.
I always try to like give those movies or those games like opportunities, and oftentimes they've been the better films or media that I've enjoyed,
Mhm.
because I didn't allow other people to make the opinion for me, and I just watched it, or I partook of it and made my own decisions, my
Oh yeah.
own. Like I feel like that's really important too. Is
Yeah. You gotta just have that your own thought on it. You can't let other people make decisions for you.
yeah.
All right. So, any other expectations or responsibilities you feel the DM kind of in this quick overview that we need to touch on before we move to the player?
I don't think so. I mean,
Well, I think the storyteller has a responsibility to understand what whatever they're plugging into their world, they need to understand how it actually like works.
100%. That is a great point. Just to back off to like Magic the Gathering, the worst part of playing that game was when somebody was playing with old cards and they didn't know what something did, and then you're playing with them, and then all of a sudden they're making stuff up, and you check them, and you're like, well, that's not what that does at all, because it was written in like a legal script, like you had lawyers writing that down instead of basic rules. Anyway, sorry, that's just something I've always found irritating about.
I hate it.
But yes,
yeah, like I feel like the storyteller has to have a knowledge of, well, if I'm going to use this spell, I need to understand what the spell does, or if I'm going to use this monster, I need to understand what it does. And the challenge rating system and all that, like, nothing's perfect. We understand, but you should at least realize, like, okay, this thing's capable of putting out X amount of damage per turn, or it's able to do this. Like, is the creature able to kill a character, like, right off the bat?
Yeah, one turn.
You should understand that that's what that creature can do before you drop it on your party.
Right, exactly.
You know,
Troglodytes.
So that's definitely something that
Amen
is
to
your
that.
responsibility. Like, I don't think you need to be a rule lawyer, but you do need to understand the mechanics of the tools you're using.
And yeah, unless you're using it for the tool of, hey, this is something you're not supposed to defeat. You're supposed to run away, and then that's on the players.
yes. In
shot.
general, just because we've gone over this before, I think it was in the NPC thing. Just because you think you can kill it doesn't mean that you can.
Well,
And maybe if you're hitting it a couple of times and 2-3 rounds have passed and it's not looking good, maybe you should just flee.
Yeah. There's always
That is an
another day.
Yeah. I shouldn't have to be like Pokemon and like throw like 4 options in front of you and be like, you can always do that last one too. Like, you can flee. It is an option. No one's gonna think less of you that you've led the dragon.
Well, that's also the point. Is it a responsibility of the storyteller to like make those options, like to sit there and say, hey, look at the board again. You could move, or you could do this, or this is your option. Like that kind of gets to the point of like when you're metagaming, but
I don't think
it's also it's not your responsibility, but I guess like I've had to do it in cases where I've thought, okay, this is like we're getting bottlenecked, like something's happening, or a player's doing something that is just like completely crippling the game, and maybe they don't mean to, maybe they just don't understand how the game is played, and the other players are not willing to offer advice. I've had to do it before where I've been like, okay, these are things you're capable of doing. And that's kind of even counter to how I feel about, like, I feel like the players should be responsible for knowing what their characters can do.
Yeah,
For
for sure.
But yeah, I've had to make that call before. I guess it's almost like the whole fudge. Like, do you fudge your rolls?
I think like when it comes to you're gonna lose majority of your party and there's something that they're just missing.
Right.
All right, hey, I know you guys looked at this, but what about that? Okay, we're gonna keep going. Like hinting at something. I mean, it happens. Sometimes as a player, you get those blindfolds on, and you're just looking straight on your tunnel vision.
Harks is an evil wizard.
He is evil, okay?
Yeah, so it's very easy to get the blinders on and to just be like, oh, I'm going to add this to my kill count, which they really need to add to character sheets in general. But that's another topic.
Yeah, why is that not a thing?
Anyway, so yeah, you get some
wizards.
Yeah, you get people who are so consistent on like, oh, I got to get that kill. I got to add it to my sheet. I'm going to kill the aquamarine dragon with the crazy shell on its back. And it's like, whoa. Maybe think about that.
Yeah. I will say this. I think before Wizards of the Coast releases another cash grab attempt at taking Magic the Gathering and combining it with Dungeons and Dragons, that they should make us character sheets with a kill count.
Mhm.
I think
Easier.
that
We're
I think
calling
they
you
should.
out.
That's I'm running on that platform.
Oh man, big call outs on this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're
Very
all from
next
Cody
Wizards.
too.
2021 Atlantic City.
What?
What's going on in Atlantic City?
War on the shore, baby.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna assume nobody has.
Oh, Wizard, you're coast.
All right.
I'm gonna assume nobody else has any overlord responsibilities or expectations they want to add. I think we covered a lot of that. Yeah. I think right now we're pretty good. If there's anything we're gonna add, we can add. We can always talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Responsibility wise, I think we're pretty good for the DM. You know, you just have to go in there and do your best. And if you start off by saying that in your session 0, hey, I'm either not seasoned at doing this, or in my case, it's been a long time since I've DM'd Dungeons and
gotta break
Dragons
that
to the point
Yeah.
where when it came to 5th, my first time, it is an adjustment. Even though the systems are pretty close, it's still an adjustment. And while you're doing it, like, do remember as the DM, like, let's say, or keeper, what have you, is many times the health counts that a creature has are kind of an average, kind of like
Yes.
a median, right? So
Yeah.
you can always either chop them down if need be, if like everybody's getting butchered and this is like a troglodyte CR1 in D&D and your group's higher level, but they didn't take into account that it might be able to attack more than once. Real situation. Knocked out one of the players like that. It was awesome, I guess.
Big learning.
Considering
experience.
everybody got like what? Everybody's books came out, and it was just like, guys, like, I'm not lying to you. Like, come on. So I forgot where I was going with that, but just take certain things into account, like that health bar. It can go up if they're whooping something's butt, and it should be a little bit tougher, and you need it to go 1 or 2 more rounds to help deplete some of the resources, like the health potions or the this and that, to make it get a little more tense for them as they move along. Like, feel free to boost those health points up, because that's what they're there for. That max number is not a max number. Like, you have that whole range. If it's a 6d8 plus 14, there's a lot more you can add on to that. Trust me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would be kind of like a responsibility expectation.
Well, to
kind of
make
a
sure.
mix.
Yeah. It's just to make sure that your story or your event is going to how it should be, and because if you come in, there's a chimera there, and you guys hit it in 2 rounds, it's dead. Clearly, that chimera should have been a little bit stronger.
I feel like that was a personal attack at Cody.
No, that chimera that I fought knocked me out 4 times in the battle.
Okay.
It was definitely at the right adjustment there.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah, I don't bring no weak shit, dude.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, so I guess off that kind of rolls us into a player expectation, where you expected, hey, I'm going to take this thing down because I'm the super strong paladin, and then womp womp.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, it happens every once in a while.
I think
Once in a great
Pour
while.
the room, Rick.
I think to finish off the DM stuff, it should be an expected on a dungeon master, keeper, overlord to at least challenge your players a little bit.
Yeah.
Make sure you challenge them. Doesn't have to be, a one hit kill every time, but challenge them. Knock them out a few times. You don't have to kill them
for
off
sure.
every time, but once in a while.
No, but going unconscious really paints a picture.
You think it would have done that the first 3 times?
No. It paints a different picture every time.
All right. So what are player responsibilities? Come prepared.
Know your sheet. That's like number one right
Yeah,
there. It's
absolutely, absolutely.
know what is on your sheet. Constantly look back.
I cannot stand it when players level up or whatever, and then they're like, "Oh, but I have this ability," and I'm like, "Okay, what does it do?" And they're like, "I have the ability." Okay, but what does it do? How is it going to save you right now? You know, like
Yeah.
you need to know what it does, not
Yeah.
me. You leveled up, not me.
I
Yeah.
mean,
You know,
I don't remember if we talked about it the last time, but the last time that we played D&D, we had leveled up, and I got an ability that let me let me teleport 60 feet in any direction once per day, and I didn't realize it, and I wound up getting attacked by a troll that killed me in one attack. And I was like, after the fight, I was like, oh, I got this ability after that, like right before we started this adventure that allowed me to just get away from that, and I just didn't realize it. So
Well,
I'm guilty of that.
When a druid sees a forest on fire, there's they get distracted.
Yeah, exactly. The forest was on fire, and I needed to protect the forest. I didn't notice the big mutant troll coming to punch you in the face 7 times.
Yeah,
Got a
so
lot of arms.
so sometimes it can be a while before you play again. So it's always a good thing to just read through your either your sheet or even just like what your classes can do to begin with. You know, right before you sit down, just to refresh, just to be like, oh, that's right. When I'm, a barbarian, I can do a reckless attack, and I have great weapon, whatever mastery as a feat, so I can take 5 points off and add 10 damage or something like that. Like, it's always good to know some of the nuances of your character, whether it be perks, feats, abilities, you name it.
Yeah, because as the overlord, yeah, you wanna maybe freshen up on what player character classes are in the game, but you shouldn't be expected to know every ruling of that class. It's on the player to be like, I'm playing this class, I have this ability, and this is what the ability does when you go to use it. You tell the DM or the overlord that as you're using it. So then everybody's on the same page. Everybody's there. Everybody knows what's going on, and it keeps that flow instead of. I guess it also goes to the whole thing of prepare your turn as a player.
Yeah.
If you
yes,
go
please.
into the book prior to make sure everything's okay. All right, this is what I'm using. Maybe be already on that page in case there's something that you have to ask. Like if it's a paladin smite, all right, is it undead celestial? You know what I mean? Because now that's going to change my damage. And know what that damage change is before you go there. It's a lot to keep track of, and that's where it's again a cooperative game.
And again, it's the player's responsibility to know that. Steve, sorry to cut you off there. Buddy.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, and expanding on that a little bit, it's also kind of the player's responsibility, not as much as the DM. Like you were saying, like the DM shouldn't know everything, and neither should the players. But the players should have some idea of the rules. Like they should know the rules of the game. They should be able to, if they do have something that they can say, like, no, that's not how that works. This is how this works. I read it here in this part of the book. They can then use that as a way to sort of show, the other players or the person running the game, like, this is why I did this way, because this rule says, it's not completely obvious that this might be how this works, but this is how this works. And if they're not aware of it, then you can show them, that like actually I was right. Or they could turn that around on you and go, oh no, actually you're wrong because you misread that. This is actually this, or that was changed in this, or we created a rule around that or whatever. And then so that way everyone's just clear, but it's good for the players to know, to have a good idea of what the rules are, so that they can sort of, so everyone's sort of on the same page more or less.
I have a really good example of this not working out in a player's benefit because they didn't look ahead. And they had prepped. They're like, okay, this is a spell I'm going to cast. So they think they're ready, right? And they're like, okay, well, I'm going to cast darkness right where I'm standing, and they're being attacked. And they're like, yeah, like they're not going to be able to see me. Well, they also couldn't see, but the
Yep.
creature that that was attacking them could see in magical darkness. So it ended up it ended up really going
Yep.
the wrong way.
Oh, that's great.
So that
But that's like the only part of that I guess would say is if they didn't know that darkness, like casting darkness, also makes it so they can't see because it's a magical darkness. But the other aspect is just that's where your player character made a decision, and sometimes you didn't know that was what's going to happen. So
That's your responsibility as the dungeon master to be like, "Are you sure?"
yeah.
You're gonna want to take a look at the book like for 2 seconds to make sure that's what you want to do.
Yeah, that's a good point to be like, are you sure? And when they say, yeah, of course, okay, then here we
All
go.
right.
Just so you know. And then to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and then if they want to do something really, really, really dangerous and dumb, that's when you just say, "You can certainly try."
Yeah, saying you can certainly try is a good way of saying, all right, but
If you die,
that's on you. Don't get mad at me when your character plummets to their death 400 feet.
Know where your pets and animals are at all times.
Uh-huh.
My griffin's flying in the sky currently.
Well, there's a reason that Cody says that. So there's been
Oh, I know.
there was a campaign where we were playing and they didn't keep track of their pets, and the flail snail blew up and took out the companions. It was a sad day because those pets were with us for a long time, and that player was very distraught after that because they lost their crew. So
Yeah.
it was unfortunate, but sometimes these things have to happen. What else is a player responsibility that you guys have?
I guess as much as it is also a overlord's responsibility to keep the plot going,
Mhm.
it is also the player's responsibility to not just drag into a spot. No, like for example, when I was in a session and people got obsessed with a well that was in a dungeon. And it's become a running joke now, and it's pretty comical. But it took up a half an hour of our sessions time to 2 to 3 players messing around with this well. And you just got to get to a certain point, like, all right, I'm trying to move forward this plot. I'm trying to move forward this storyline as a player because I'm intrigued. I should stop dicking around.
I am guilty. I have committed that sin in an outhouse and in a cave later that night. And my fiance was not happy with me because she's the captain of the crew, and me and the other 2 guys are just dicking around. She's just like, all right, I'm over here. I need to go see what they're doing. And then she comes in, and there's a rope tied around one of the characters, but nobody was holding it because
it wasn't tied to anything.
Yeah, we're playing with a skeleton, and the guy fell. And she walks in on this stuff, and it was like being caught by the boss, like in real life, because literally all these things happened all at once because of bad rolls. The guy fell, and it's like, oh, there was nothing on the other side of the rope. So yeah, he fell, and we're just poking a skeleton because we thought we were clever. Bad times, pay attention. Pay attention. Pay attention to your actions and look at time, because it is a huge sin of mine to just get carried away in the RP and then 30 minutes goes by. I'm definitely a sinner on that, Mark. So
I do it to myself all the time as the storyteller. I'm like, I don't have enough material planned for my group. And I'm like, I'm worried. I get like anxiety. Like I'm gonna get to a point where like I don't have anything ready to go. And I'm like always afraid that I'm not gonna be able to like come up with something on the fly, which I am pretty good at, but I was like, I always doubt myself on that. And consistently my players get like 25, maybe 50% of what I've planned.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Easy.
Yeah.
I would say, especially with the group that we've been playing.
Oh yeah.
The Harks is an evil man, and I know it.
He is not evil.
One day
For
we'll
those
get
who don't
backstory.
know, for those who don't know, my character did an insight check. Something seemed off, and for about a half an hour till all the sessions after, anytime this character is referenced, the Dragonborn shopkeeper, my character just believed that he was hiding something. He was a liar, and somebody else previously before it lied. So that RP always takes a while.
Yeah.
Always drags my character along. So,
So that's an expectation from the player on the DM, thinking that all their NPCs are evil, and that's not a good idea.
Well, no,
That is
it
so
was
not fun. It's so not fun. When
It
you
was how it was rolled, and my
when you get
character did
into
get
a
a good
world
roll.
and like every interaction you have is a negative interaction,
Oh yeah,
like that sucks.
Yeah.
And like that's like surefire way to kill your game. But that's like way off topic for what
Yeah.
we're doing.
That'll be.
I think we've hit our
Yeah.
we've hit our talking points.
Yeah. I mean, like, one other thing that is a responsibility of the players,
No,
I
Steve,
think that
stop.
we haven't really gone over is being part of a cohesive unit. You know, everyone's there to play. Everyone's
Be
there.
a team.
Well, yeah, everyone's there to play. It's not just about you, and a part of your responsibility is to understand that and play along with the players. Like, you'll have your time to shine, but you shouldn't be there to make the story be all about you. And understand that everybody's time is valuable, and that you have to you all have to work together to move the story along, and that's that's a big part of the player's responsibility.
And I find out too, like I find as well, like when you get players that are also DMs in their other games, like in their own games,
Mhm.
like they tend to be more helpful, like not just to the DM, but also to the other players, like
Mhm.
because they're like they know more about the rules, or
Yeah.
they're like, oh, like maybe this is a little bit more effective for you to try or whatever. So that always helps. But I think also being like, no matter what role you're in, whether it's a player character or you're the keeper, the storyteller, like you just have to be humble because like you're just sitting there playing games with your friends. You're trying to have fun,
Yeah.
so like don't, because you're telling the story, don't let like power get to your head in the same way as like just because you're a player in someone's fantasy world that they made, that doesn't give you freedom to just like destroy everything they made.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
You shouldn't-
everybody should be working together.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you shouldn't be there to derail things or like just do something goofy that goes against what everybody else in the party wants to do because you think it's funny or whatever, like
Yeah, it's like there's a time and place for that. Like things happen and they happen naturally where it's funny.
yeah.
Like just like the barbarian in the sending stone. Like everybody was using sending stones. And now this barbarian in our party has a rock that he thinks is a sending stone.
Yeah, he just picked it up.
Because he picked it up and was like, does it work? And I made him roll like an intelligence check and he failed like super bad. So I was like, okay, yeah, you think it's a sending stone now.
Yeah.
There you go.
Like, and that was funny, but it didn't break
Yeah.
the game.
It wasn't a 3-hour quest for him to find a rock that looked just like it or anything like
Right.
that.
Or like him being like, oh, like Cody just laid out this really like cool tavern map or whatever. I'm gonna go set the tavern on fire, like turn
Yeah.
one. Like
Right.
why?
Because I can.
You as a player are expected to help move the story along. It's granted it is not your responsibility alone to do that, but
You're a part of it.
Yeah, and if you're gonna not participate in the story in any way, yeah, you can do your own things, but if you're not gonna participate and you're gonna be like, well, the neutral thing, like if somebody's like true neutral and they're like, oh well, I have nothing to gain or lose, so I'm not going to participate. Like, okay, you can grab your sheet, you can get in your car and go home.
That's where I call it too neutral.
Yeah.
Because I hate it because it's like If you don't care about anything that's going on ever, why are they here? What is the point of like why was that an intriguing thing that you wanted to play? Somebody that doesn't care about anything.
hmm
Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
At least if you're gonna sit there and say, hey, this person doesn't care about other people, this person's like a sociopath or whatever, then play them that way.
Yeah.
You know, have them have interactions with people where they just don't care that other people are like suffering or whatever. Like that's okay, but like don't sit there and just be like, I don't care about anything at all. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there's a war going on. Meh.
Yeah.
Gods are fighting each other. Meh. Dragons are popping up out of the earth. Meh. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you're playing a fucking fantasy game. Why did you want to be a part of it if you don't want to interact or give a shit about anything?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. No, it's as a player, you have to have no matter what character you're playing, you have to have something that works together with the overall plot.
Well, that's why I
Sure.
really think that I can't stress it enough. I think that session zero, I think as the storyteller, talking to your players individually and being like, what are you thinking of? You know, like,
Mhm.
here's a general idea of what's going on in my world. Here's a one-page write up of, here's the top 5 things that everybody should know.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, like this is the kind of game I play. You can expect very dangerous encounters and intrigue or whatever. Like getting all that stuff out ahead of time is like super helpful, but it also allows your players to tailor their characters to your world and then for you to tailor your world to the characters.
hmm
I think that's a very important thing that maybe we should go over at another time. Is the actual like what should you talk about in a session zero? Because
Yeah.
yeah, you're 100% correct. If you have a high RP campaign where if there's any kind of combat, it's to the death for the most part.
Yeah.
Like if you're fighting a creature or fighting a monster, like yeah, it's going to try and kill you. If you get knocked unconscious, you have maybe 2 turns before it kills you.
Yeah, and I think that it's also very important just like to get that all out in the open like first and foremost because we've had it at our tables where we come to expect like a certain amount from like everybody just because we're so used to playing with one another. But when we try to get people that are maybe not so used to the game or they're completely new to it or they're just new to role playing and you get them in there, it's very easy for the newer players to get swept under the rug basically, like shoved right out of the spotlight because people that are more experienced, I feel like, when they see openings and opportunities, they jump at them, like, oh, here's a chance for my character to interact with the world in a way that is beneficial to me or whatever. Like, I'm going to jump at the chance to do that. And it's not wrong of them to do that, but I feel like sometimes you get newer players that they feel like they can't do anything because the more experienced players are already covering so much
Yeah.
or they're already like I'm investigating or I'm going to do the tracking and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and the new players like, well, I don't really know what to do because people are pretty much doing what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or I didn't speak up right away because I'm not sure, I'm not confident playing the game, you
Right.
know.
And that may be where a meta approach does help a little bit. Not so much meta. I don't know what the term would be, where it's just like, oh, well, I was going to do that, and I really don't know what to do now. And be like, oh, well, why don't you roll instead, and then my character can do something else because you want to track. And
Yeah.
then this
Well,
way to walk them in, that might be a
that's
thing.
Well,
also
that's
what, like, when we were talking about like losing the animal companions, like in that campaign, I have you and I have our friend Chris, and both of you are uh you've ran games before, and where the other two players are really they don't have a ton of experience running them, but they've played games. Um it was nice for me to have you guys as kind of almost like sub DMs to be like, oh no, this is how you do this, or oh no, this is, you should look for this because it kind of lightens the load a little bit, but it also helps everybody at the table kind of like we're in this together. Like
Well,
everybody's helping
that's
everybody out.
that's all it is. I mean, it is like there is a difference between metagaming and being a cooperative team.
Yeah.
And it's the difference of, even if, here's a group of us, my character, oh hey, it's like the discussion of, all right, who's the better survivalist? That'd be like, yeah, we're talking numbers, and we're talking, yeah, my survival's a +10 to my roll, and yours is a +5, so you should do something else while I do that. That's a discussion that's happening between the characters, but in just a different wordage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I consider that stuff not metagaming. It's just you're not going to RP the conversation. You're going to be serious.
Right, and it's even something just to say is like I've done this before too, where I like Graz will say something to Gil
Yeah.
and be like, oh well, he knows more about the woods than I do, so I'm not even gonna bother. But when it
Yeah.
comes to magic, I might know more than he does,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the kind of like just getting in that mindset,
And that's why making them, like, not necessarily making them together, but when you sit down with everybody else and it's like, all right, well, here's what my character is. If you have a group of thieves, you should probably be playing a game where you're thieving. If not, if it's like, oh, well, you're going to be going through dungeons and fighting giant monsters and everybody's a thief, that's probably not going to work out.
Right,
in
and I feel
5e, but you might be able to do that in 5e if you diversify enough.
But I feel like
But you have to
that's like
diversify.
the huge thing about the session 0 is because if I write a story in a world that depends on having people being of like cleric or paladin status, like the whole group, the whole party, and then everybody shows up and they're like, oh yeah, like I'm a warlock and I'm a thief and I'm a barbarian, and it doesn't fit, or they play something like, oh, in my world there's no such thing as bards. Well, 2 of my players are playing bards. Like those are all just like complications that you would avoid from working together from the start.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's like I feel like that's a little like that's kind of where we started this conversation when we were saying like there's the expectation and then there's the reality, and in order to make it work, especially as adults with conflicting schedules and playing games online, or like there's a little bit of give and take that has to happen both ways. It can't just be all on somebody's shoulders.
No.
Everybody should carry the load together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Frodo.
And that's where I think like the rules.
I can't yeet the ring, but I can yeet you.
Okay. Well, anywho, that's where I think like an expectation that many people have is like that somebody should know all the rules, and that's the rules lawyer, which I had mentioned. I'd like to mention this towards the end. You don't need to be a rules lawyer. It's good to know them. It's your responsibility to know enough of the rules so that you can operate in the game. Or if you're brand new to the game, it is an expectation that people will walk you through them. But it makes it difficult when somebody knows every rule, especially in the older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, where a lot of stuff conflicted itself. Because in one chapter it might say something, but then in another book that just came out by a different author, there's something different in there. And you can't really tell at the time because they're all
we suffer from this terribly.
Yeah, they're all under the same banner of being a wizard's book. So then the next thing you know, you're pointing, but it says here. Oh, but it says here, and it's like, well, what does the actual player's handbook say?
Right.
Just use that.
I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me just this year where people were like, "Oh, that's 3.5, dude. Oh, that's 3.0 or whatever." Like you're playing the wrong edition.
You guys all need to make will saves.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, but you can, and that's still a good thing when somebody says, "Hey, make a will save." Like, absolutely, I won't, but I'm gonna give it a shot.
I would if those existed, but
right.
I'm gonna give a little
what
shuffle.
modifier is that?
See, and that's when they smart talk you like that. That's when you drop the world-ending boss.
That's when the expectation of the players versus the DM really kicks in, because now it's time.
Which that is an
time to
awful
shine.
expectation. That like I don't know why people think that that's a thing.
I think that's because
Like-
the Gygax days, because that's how it was when he was developing it. That's at least the way that it's perceived by a lot of the public.
Yeah.
Is that it is the DM versus the players in a way,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. But.
I just think it's fun. Like there's a little bit of competition because it's just like, okay, yeah, you have all these really cool and powerful things that you can do, and I'm going to put you in my world of really powerful and cool things, and they're gonna interact. Like there's a little bit of like, oh, I got you there, or oh, I'm gonna send something at you that you're gonna have a hard time beating.
Yeah.
But the flat out like I'm trying to kill your characters and ruin your fun because I'm the dungeon master, like that's not okay.
Unless, of course, if it's been discussed, like, hey,
if that's what you want to play, sure.
Yeah. But that is a good point.
I'd agree. It is a good point, Finger gun.
So good.
What was I going to say? I totally forgot what I was going to say now.
I
Good
don't
thing
know.
I
I'm
can
just
edit
trying
this part out.
I'm just trying to keep it going with the, the finger guns over here.
Anyway, tuning in to Tabletop Totality.
Yeah, I got lost there. Anyway, so yeah, we should probably seal this up. So I'm going to make sure.
Weeknights at 9.
Weeknights at 9.
Just after All in the Family.
Damn.
All right. So how do you guys want to close this one off here? I've already made a mark to get rid of this whole section. So.
Use your goop.
Yeah. Use your goop, kid.
Show me a goop.
There's a whole bunch more that you could end up doing, I think, and there's a lot that we probably missed out on that are probably going to come as soon as we stop recording this podcast. So I think we could probably revisit this another day. I think we hit a bunch of different things that are important to know when you're about to start a new campaign or join one, of things that you should keep in mind, because like we're saying, everybody should be carrying the load together. The DM has certain responsibilities, and sure, there are some expectations of what they can or should be doing, but in the end of the day, it's going to be what they can do, what they're capable of doing. And as the player, there are some expectations, just be prepared, know your stuff to the best of your ability, and everybody should be at least trying to have fun. And that should be a good place to start with everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have fun.
Yeah.
Do role-playing games.
Do role-playing games. Play Call of Cthulhu. Play Legendary Adventure. Play anything that you can find. Anything that you can find.
Smoke skooma.
Smoke skooma. If you're a Skyrim aficionado or Morrowind aficionado.
Elder Scrolls aficionado.
Yeah, I should have said that. Good thing I
got
that
you.
out. I'm gonna leave it in. I mean, other than that, I think we hit just about the nail on the head for today.
Yep.
So
Seems like it.
So that's our podcast for the day. This has been Tabletop Totality. I'm Frank, saying good night.
Goodbye.
Later.
See you later, bone ponies.
Nay.
Gonna feed you some oats.
Some ghost oats.
Yeah, why would
Goats. as they call it.
Well done. Well done.
You're gonna feed a horse goats? Yeah, the ghost oats.
Yes.
Go grab the
ghost
bag
oats.
of goats over there. What? The ghost oats?